Hello everybody, you are tuned into Planted, and today we're going to talk about a much requested topic, how to repot your plants. How to know when your plants are ready to be repotted. What are the signs and situations where you go, yep, I think it's about time. Once you realize that, yep, it's about time, how do you then prepare yourself to make sure you're ready to repot correctly? And then finally, we're going to actually repot a plant with you to show you how it's done and make sure you're doing it correctly. There are basically two different situations under which a plant is ready to be repotted. Situation number one, positive situation, is things have been going well with your plant. You've had it for about a year, probably closer to 2 years, and within those 2 years, your plant has stayed in the same place and it has been thriving. Over the past few months, perhaps past few weeks, you've noticed that things aren't going so well anymore and you're quite confident has remained the same. You've been watering it the same, it's been in the same spot, nothing much has changed. In that sort of a situation, it might be that your plant is ready to be repotted. We'll show you how to check to make sure you're 100% sure it's about time, but ideally you're in that sort of a world where things have been going well with your plant, it's now ready to take it up to the next level. Scenario number two, things are not going well with your plant. Basically, you've been overwatering it, the roots are damaged, it needs to be completely repotted. And in scenario number two, we're gonna show you what that looks like so you know your plant is at a situation. Hopefully you will never see that for the rest of your plant life. But if you do see it or a friend has it, you will know exactly what to do to repot your plant in that situation. The two are very similar. But let's talk about scenario number one, happy scenario. So in this scenario number one, what are the typical tells that, hey, it's ready, my plant is ready to be repotted? There are a few things you can look out for. Let's say you had this plant, let's say I've had this plant for about 2 years now, and I go to water my plant. One thing you might notice is as you're watering your plant, that water doesn't really get soaked or absorbed into the soil. So what ends up happening is it sits at the top of your soil for a little bit, or what happens is you pour it and it very quickly starts coming down the drainage holes. It almost feels that every bit of water you're putting in the soil just automatically comes down. In other words, your soil is no longer able to absorb any water. In a situation like that, what's probably happened is you've had your plant again for a couple of years and that soil has compressed and decomposed over such a long time that there's basically no more area within the space, within the grains of soil for water to go through. And in that sort of situation, you're basically not able to get water into the roots of your plant. And as a result, it might be time to re-water your plant. So if you start seeing that, that's a good indication that, hey, there may be too many roots here. And we'll talk about in a second how to check that. Another tell that you might have the same situation is you might notice some of the older leaves, especially some of the smaller ones, go yellow and fall away. Now, it is very important to recognize that that symptom you will only see in some of the older leaves and not in the newer leaves. If you're seeing yellowing all over, then it's probably a different issue. But if you're seeing yellowing on some of the older leaves are wilting away or falling, this could be an indication of the situation. To be honest, it's a pretty good situation to be in because it means your plant has been happy and now it's the perfect time to repot it. So in that sort of a situation, thumbs up, you've been doing a good job for a couple of years. We'll get you on the way to continue to do that. How do we know for sure our plants are ready to be repotted if that's the sort of situation it's in? The best thing to do is to basically look at the roots. What I want you to do is take the plant out of the pot, look at the roots and assess, is this plant ready to be repotted? And we're gonna go through different plants here and try to make you guess if by the look of the root, a particular plant is ready to be repotted. So, situation number one, you've taken out the plant from the pot. This is a very good sign. I want you to notice a few things. Thing number one is notice a lot of the roots here are white. Almost all of them are white. They're very light, very light and white. Very, very good sign. If it was dark and black, very bad sign. Remember how we talked about good situation and bad situation? If you start seeing black roots, you're in bad situation number two. But now you're seeing white roots, this is a good situation. If I look at this plant, what I noticed are a few things. So I'm noticing all of these roots. It looks like it has quite an extensive root system, but I'm still seeing a lot of soil, right? So, I mean, if you go around here, you can see that there's plenty of room for the roots to grow up this plant. Even if I look within the root systems here, I can see lots of spaces between the roots. I'm also gonna look down. I don't know if you can see it. Here we go, we're gonna show you down, and you can see there's still plenty of soil here. Now, what this tells me is this plant is very happy, right? There's an extensive root system, but there's still plenty of room for the roots to grow. It's not quite ready to be repotted. If you saw the yellowing that I talked about earlier, the roots are probably not a cause of that. This plant can wait a bit longer before it gets repotted. Let's look at plant number two. Plant number two, we are looking at this Monstera. Here we go, taking it out. Now, So in a situation like this, what might happen is it might be difficult to take the plant out of your pot. That's probably because, not probably, that's because it's been here for a long time and the roots are pressing against the pot. It's a good sign. In a situation like this, all you need to do is press the edges of your pot and loosen it, and then, hey, here we go. Now, again, let's look at a few things. White roots, like we saw before, good sign, right? As we said, there's no blackening. That means that no roots have been rotting here. We look at the bottom. There's still some room for growth here. As you can see, there's still soil. And if I go around here, I can still see, for example, on this side, lots of room for more roots to grow, right? This, although is more of an extensive root system than the previous plant, still this can go a lot longer before being repotted. If it were me, I would wait for this plant before doing any sort of repotting. So this plant can go right back in its nursery pot. We can put him or her right back into its big pot, and then we can look at plant number 3 and see if this is ready to be repotted. Now see how easily this came out? Probably, oh yeah, I mean, here we go. If we look closely at this one, again, few white roots, really happy. But as you can see, nowhere near the same level of root system that the other plants had. This plant can go easily 2 more years before having to be checked again for repotting. This plant can go back in here. Look at this, new growth, great signs of a happy plant. And we can move it back to the side. And so, plant number 4, peace lily. We take this peace lily out. Let's look at this plant. And here we go. Here we go. Now, if I look at this plant, again, now this has a much deeper root system. Unlike the previous 2 plants, you can see that the roots are going all the way from the top, right? So the entire soil body is basically full of roots. If I check underneath, there's a little bit room for soil, but definitely much more covered. This plant has been looking good. There haven't been signs of any yellowing, but I can tell by this root system, and I know because I've had this plant for a couple of years now, this plant is ready to be repotted. So we are going to take this plant, and this is going to be our demonstration plant for our repotting. We've gone through phase 1. We have determined whether the plant is ready to be repotted, and indeed this plant is ready to be repotted. How do we now go and repot it? So like I said, the first thing we need to do is prepare ourselves and make sure we have everything set up to get the repotting done successfully. We need a few things. The first thing we need is another pot to repot this plant into. It's really highly important to make sure that the pot you are replanting into is only a little bit bigger than the previous one. Like, see that gap? That's how much of a gap you want. One of the biggest mistakes we see is when somebody takes a plant and then repots it into a pot that's too big, usually with good intentions. I think the intuition tends to be, oh, there'll be room for my plant to grow, there'll be room for the roots. Although it's good intentions, it's not the right thing for your plant to do. What ends up happening is the new pot is too big, it's holding way more soil, obviously, and that soil is holding way more water, which takes longer to dry. And as a result, that water that's sitting there for more of a period of time is going to end up killing the roots of your plant. So what was once a happy, thriving plant is now a dying plant. So the second thing we want to do is make sure you have the right type of soil. Now we have a completely different video where we talk about all the different types of soil that we can have, how to make sure that you are picking the right soil for your plant. You want to 100% make sure that you are getting the soil that is appropriate to your plant. We have this here that's already ready for the peace lily. Watch that video, it'll explain everything you need to know about picking the right soil for your plant. Please don't skip this step. The second biggest mistake we see people do is go to a plant shop, just get any standard potting soil garden mix and just putting it in their plant. That usually is way too dense and holds way too much water for the plant. You need to make sure you're using the right soil. So with that being said, I've got my new pot, I've got my soil. The other thing I'm gonna need is my chopstick or some sort of tool like this, and we will get into why you would need this shortly. So now that we have our materials, equipment, and we're ready to repot our plant, how do we do it? The first thing I wanted you to do is when you take your plant out of your pot, I need you to engage with it. You cannot just mechanically take a plant out of a pot and just start repotting it. The first thing you need to do is look at the roots and try to understand what's happening, what this plant might require. The first thing I want you to do is look out for any black roots. Now, like I said, this plant doesn't have any black roots. It looks totally healthy, but if your plant did have black roots, what I want you to do is take a clean pair of scissors and just cut them off. To be honest, they're probably going to be so mushy and soggy that you can probably pull them off with your hand, but that is highly, highly important. Those black roots are basically rotted roots, and what you don't want to do is put those rotted roots into the new pot, because then it'll impact the whole soil. And that goes against what you're trying to do. So that's number one. Look at all the roots and take out any of the rotted roots you might have. Now, second thing I want you to do is look at how tightly packed the roots are. If you're in a situation like this isn't too bad. As you can see, I can very easily pull away, not very easily, but I can pull away at these roots and they will move out, right? They'll come off the plant, and that's what we want to do. If your plant has so many roots that it's really, really tight, you're gonna have to put more of an effort in there, because what ends up happening is if your roots are too tightly packed together and then you place that plant in a new pot, those roots haven't been encouraged to like move away, and therefore won't easily transfer into the new soil, if that makes sense. So what we want to do is effectively break the directions that the roots have gone in. When I say break, I mean change, ideally outward, so that when you do place it in the new pot, those roots can travel into the new soil. That's the second thing I want you to do. So I'm just gonna do it with this plant to demonstrate. But again, pay attention to it. If you see, for example, it's very common, especially when a plant has been in a pot for 3-4 years, you might see all of the roots going round in circles like this. What's happened is the roots have grown, they've gone at the edge of the pot, and then they just start going around in a circle. And then you basically see like a spirally kind of shape with all of your roots. If you see that, definitely what you want to do is break away the roots, just like move them out of place and encourage them to go towards different directions. So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna start doing that with the soil here. I'm gonna go over my pot, make sure that the roots are ready to go into the new pot. So what I'm gonna do now is start replanting. First thing you wanna do is you wanna take some soil and put it on the base of your pot. You wanna make sure, do a little bit of testing to make sure that when you place this plant in, that it's gonna be a little bit below the line, because obviously you want it to be below the line of the pot, because when you water, you don't want water to fall out. So I have put too much soil in here, so I'm gonna go a little back, take some of the soil out, and ta-da, this is perfect. So then the next thing I'm gonna do, I like to do this, and it depends on your plant. I like to break away the top layer of soil. So I just go here very quickly, and then I'm basically gonna start pushing soil around the plant, down the sides. This might take you a few minutes. Take your time when you're doing this. Make sure that you are getting soil in relatively evenly. All right, and then critical part. You gotta determine something to yourself. You gotta search deep within yourself and ask yourself, are you a tapper or are you a shaker? If you're a tapper, you're gonna take your plant and start tapping it. And if you're a tapper, then that tapping is gonna encourage the soil to go down the sides of the plant. If you're a shaker, like I am, you take your plant and you start. Done. And then finally, you gotta be a bit of a poker, and everybody's a little bit of a poker. And what you do is you can take your chopstick or your poke stick, whatever you want to use, and gently start poking it down the sides. Effectively, what we're doing here is pushing the soil down the sides of the pot, because what we want to do is make sure that there are no air pockets on the sides of the pots, because if there are air pockets, then what happens is if a root is in that air pocket, water is not going to sit in that pocket. So that area is going to be really dry, and it'll eventually dry out the root and kill it. All of this we can put back in. Now, because I've tapped, shaked, and poked, I can see lots of gaps that have already started to emerge. Just gonna put the soil back in here. And ladies and gentlemen, dear viewers, we now have a beautiful replanted peace lily. Ah! Now, if your plant is big enough, you can return it to your original planter, but I know that this planter won't necessarily fit. It's a little bit too big. So this guy is gonna get an upgrade. And that is how you replant your plant. What you wanna do is get a watering can and make sure to water the entire soil bed. You wanna make sure that the entire soil bed is evenly moist. We have a video on how to water your plants, so definitely go watch that. But effectively, water the whole thing until lots of water is falling at the bottom of your drainage hole. Let that dry, and now you have a new planted plant all ready to thrive in your home. Now, before we tune out, I really want to quickly talk about that second type of plant that we were talking about. Bad case scenario, if things haven't been going well with your plant, like really badly, you've probably overwatered it. And to demonstrate that, I have adopted an Areca palm, which I'm fairly confident has been overwatered. The reason I'm fairly confident it's been overwatered is when I sniff it, it smells really, really bad. So it smells like fungus. I know that there's something wrong here. So what I'm gonna do is very carefully take it out of the pot and have a look at the soil. And this is gonna be tough because it's been watered recently, but we can try. Okay. So you see how I've pulled it out and some of the pot has come out and some of it hasn't. And when I look in here, I can see lots of roots actually. Here, we got a root bit, we've got a root bit, we've got tons of root bits. What that means is these roots have rotted away and broken away from the main plant because, again, they've rotted away, they've been overwatered. Now, if you look closely here, unfortunately, oh my God. You see all of these roots breaking away. Super sad, super sad. Sadness. Now, again, this plant has been overwatered. It's not been happy. In a situation like this, the replanting story is a lot different to the happy story like the peace lily was. So what do you want to do in a situation like this is, first things first, you want to remove all of the soil. That's like the number one thing. So you basically want to take every piece of, I mean, this is gone. This is have no roots attached to it. But what you want to do is try and salvage every bit you can. So I'm going to take these parts out. See, this is fine. This is fine. I'm just going to go, oof, this is not fine. I lied. Just going to do this really quickly. So what I've done is I've taken all of the Rika stems that look relatively healthy. These roots have not rotted away, and we've removed it from all of the bad parts. Now, all of these stems, all of these roots have completely rotted. This smells really bad. So the first thing you want to do is you want to discard all of this. It's really, really important not to mix this soil with any other good pieces of soil that you have, because there's fungus in here that could contaminate the bigger piece of soil. So I'm going to clean this very, very quickly. And hopefully you are then left with nice pieces of Areca palms, which you can then transplant into a new one. And in a situation like this, again, you want to make sure as much of the roots, as much of the old soil has been taken away, as much of the dead roots have been cut away, and then you can use a new pot. I'm going to use this one that the peace lily came out of, and you can replant it in almost exactly the same way we did earlier. And there you go. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you found this video helpful. If you liked it, give us a like, comment, subscribe. If you want any more information, visit us at planted.ae. Check out all of our other videos, and if you have any other questions, leave us a comment below, and we'll do our best to get to those questions as soon as we can. See ya.